As you can see from the agenda, there's a number of logos on top, and it takes, quite a number of people to put a program like this together. And I want to thank Sean Connon, who works at the Adirondack North Country Association, and Amanda Levine, who also are two directors at the Adirondack North Country Association, who work on an energy team. And I want to thank them for helping put this together. And I really want to thank Pat Courtney Strong and the Mid-Hudson Lighting Consortium for doing a lot of the heavy lifting and putting this program together. At this point, I want two people to stand up, and then I want, as elected officials, to kind of put in your mind their faces. And that would be David, please stand up, and Jen Perry. So these two people are energy circuit riders, whereas I'm the Clean Energy Community Coordinator, and I've worked with most of you. These two people also, as our circuit riders, help municipal governments outside the CEC and inside the CEC put together, help you with finding resources to put together some of your energy projects. So in between the breaks and stuff, if you have projects going in your community, by all means touch bases with them. My role at ANCA is I am the Clean Energy Community Coordinator, and that's where a municipality, I think most of you know this, I've worked with a lot of you, need to complete 4 out of the 10 action items to get into the pool of funding for a clean energy project in your community. I have in the back the pond document that was the new pond document that just came out August 1st to describe step by step the process in that program. And again, at the break time, and my card is back there as well, so during the break or after, please by all means touch base with me. We can set up an appointment, and I'll be happy to go over the program with you. As our circuit riders and myself travel about the communities, we travel across the 7 northern counties of New York State, and working in all types from the county, town, village, and city levels. And one of the most common things we hear is, can you help me reduce the cost of my street lights? And in some of the smaller communities we've worked in, it becomes almost one of the largest budget items. So today, we're focused on LED street lights. And I hope, and I think it will be, an extremely good benefit to you. We have, I think, some of the best people in the Northeast, and as I start to read some of the resumes, some of the best people in the United States working on LED street light conversions in front of you today. So take advantage of that. And I want to just close by saying, thank you for coming. I've said that a couple of times, but I also want to thank you for the service that you give to your community. I know that's a lot of work, it's a lot of dedication, it's a lot of time, and money is always on your mind, and the quality of services that you provide is also always on your mind. And I hope today you find it very beneficial. I will say one other thing in closing. I'll say 2 things in closing. For the people in the back that participated in this morning's program, I really want all the elected officials to be able to ask and get answers to all their questions. So I ask that we not interrupt the dialogue between the elected officials. And then in closing, I will say we'll have a recording that's available that you can share with your other municipal leaders or your other board members as well. With that said, have a good afternoon. I think you'll find this very beneficial, and I will turn it over to Pat Courtney Strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. All right. Thank you. I am Pat Courtney Strong. We have about 20 people joining us by webinar, and so I have to give some instructions to them as well, which will be of no use to you. But then we'll get down to business. Okay, so as you know, this is a webinar, and we are keeping our attendees on mute, but you can communicate with us through the chat feature of WebEx. So if you've signed on through your computer, there's a toolbar that becomes visible at the top center of your screen when you put the cursor there. On the toolbar, you'll see the chat icon to the right. You can communicate with us privately or publicly through that by using the drop-down menu to select who you want to speak to. This is how you also should submit questions for the speakers to us, and we will we'll see that the speaker gets your question. As I'm sure you know, things can happen during a webinar. So if you get disconnected for any reason, just log back in. And if you notice audio or visual issues on our end, feel free to use the chat box or email us to let us know what you're experiencing. I'm going to show you some email and texting options that you have. If for any reason you lose a computer connection, just dial back in by phone. There was a phone number provided with everyone's invitation, and you can just listen in, and you'll be sent the slides and the full video recording later. So thank you for that. I just want to show some options for communicating with us if you are not able to get to the chat box. So to attend by phone, that's the first number there. Tech support is listed. And if you want to submit a question, you can do so without the chat box. You can do so at that email address there, melissaherreria@courtneystrong.com, or you can text us. All right? Thank you. So back to the beginning. And I do want to make sure you can see our speakers who are with us remotely today. So there's Amanda Mazzoni in Syracuse. And let's see, I think we do have Jen with us and Nina with us, but it's voice activated, so you'll see them as they speak. I'm just making sure everybody's enabled. All right, yeah, now we see Nina and we see Amanda. We don't yet see Jen, but I'm sure she'll come back. And I'm sorry that in some cases, you know, the wonderful visual of our speakers may crowd out some of the words on the screen, but again, you'll be receiving the slides afterward. All right, so here we go. Our agenda today is, you know, we heard a great message from Jamie Rogers, and after I give a brief overview of what we've been doing with our project, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Mazzoni of Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board and Jen Metzger. She's with Citizens for Local Power in the Hudson Valley, and she's also our partner in the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium. They're going to discuss the economics of owning versus renting the streetlights. And as we took questions from our clean energy community coordinators based on what they've been hearing from you all, we understand that that's really where we need to be in terms of you know, broaching this topic. You really want to understand the economics of, you know, why not continue to rent as long as the utility goes to the LED technology versus, you know, should I take the considerable time and effort and expense of purchasing the streetlights. So that's that, and then we'll move on to George Woodbury, who is with LightSmart Consulting out of North Carolina. He works nationally and internationally on streetlight conversion, and he'll be joined by Nina Orville of Abundant Efficiency in Dobbs Ferry, Westchester County, which was one of the first small communities in the state of New York to convert to LED streetlights. It's probably now at least 5 years or more ago. Then we're going to come back to George for an overview of technology and design best practices. And then I'm going to wrap up with the group, with the team of speakers, to just kind of go over the key steps, you know, that you want to think about if you're going to move on to LED conversion. We're going to try to sum it up for you. All right, so these are our panelists when they're not on a webcam. This is what they look like. And, you know, I think you're here because you know a lot of the points I'll raise here, but it's quite a list when you gather it all together. It's an opportunity for truly, I would call it deep energy savings. And it became very clear to our group that NYSERDA, the State Energy Authority, regards it as one of the most beneficial things that municipalities can do, one of the most high-impact actions that a muni can take toward greenhouse gas reduction. So that's why, you know, we're devoting significant time and effort to this. It results in dramatically lower maintenance costs. Now, you have to, you know, get there to you know, switch over in technology, but once you do get there, the maintenance costs are very, very different than what you've had in the past. Improved lighting uniformity, enhanced pedestrian and vehicle safety. The list just goes on, and not the least of which is an opportunity to demonstrate your environmental leadership and to prepare your community for the future, because some of what George Woodbury will be discussing is the Internet of Things, and the fact that when you have this opportunity to convert and you're making this significant investment, that's the time to think about what other technology is coming down the pike and what you want to leave the door open for with the technology choices you make today. So that's why we consider it a win-win on many fronts. And our project is called the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium. We're halfway through our funding period. We'll be doing this work until mid-2018. But it was always contemplated that what we're doing in the Mid-Hudson would be shared statewide. So this is, one of the first of these sharing sessions. And then we're actually, one of our major deliverables in the project is to produce some requests for proposal that could be used or imitated or adapted from, and those will live on after us in the form of piggybacking under New York State procurement law. You'll be able to do that for a period of time if you wish. So our big deliverables were the assessment called LED Streetlight Conversion in New York, a common sense guide for local governments in the Mid-Hudson, authored by Jen Metzger, PhD, and then her co-authors were George Woodbury and Nina Orville. So you'll be hearing about that. And then the piece of the project we're on now is putting together procurement aggregations of communities that want to save money by doing this work together, entering into separate contracts with a company or an individual that will help them convert, but going out to the marketplace as a group. So that's our project. These are some of our members. These are the munis that we're working most closely with. I think there's about 18 of them now that are very active, and then we're communicating, of course, publicly across hundreds of communities in the Mid-Hudson and outside the Mid-Hudson by being here. All right, over to Amanda Mazzoni in Syracuse.
All right, so again, my name is Amanda Mazzoni. I am a planner at the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board. For those of you who aren't familiar with our organization, we were founded in 1966 to serve our 5-member counties, which include Cayuga, Cortland, Madison, Onondaga, and Oswego. And we are here to provide them assistance with any development needs they may have. There are similar organizations throughout the state that can provide similar assistance, and I'll talk about some of that in just a minute. But so our organization has a couple of key program areas, including community development, economic development, environmental management, transportation planning, and energy management, and that's where I come in. I'm currently funded through NYSERDA's Clean Energy Communities program as one of their regional coordinators to provide assistance to the municipalities in my 5-county region related to the Clean Energy Communities program. In case anybody on the call or up in person is unfamiliar with the program, the Clean Energy Communities program is a program to encourage and assist municipalities throughout the state to complete clean energy, what NYSERDA calls high-impact actions. And so you can see on this slide here at the top left, NYSERDA has come up with a list of 10 high-impact actions that coordinators in the different regions that are outlined on this map. Coordinators are available in each of those regions to assist in implementing these actions. One of these actions is converting streetlights to LEDs, so that's how there's available free assistance to municipalities throughout the state for LED streetlight assistance. And so, again, that's one of the high-impact action items. But just to recap on the Clean Energy Communities program, if a community does complete 4 of that list of 10 high-impact actions, they can become available for one of the Clean Energy Communities grants that are available in each region. So each region throughout the state has 18 available grants to start with, and then it's first come, first serve based on municipality size. The grants will be given out on whoever finishes those 4 actions first. So in some of the regions that you see on this map, all of the grants have already been given out, but in places like the North Country, there are still a number of remaining grants that can also be used towards LED streetlight conversion projects if you complete 4 of the other high-impact actions. So there's a number of different ways you can go about this process of LED streetlight conversion working into this Clean Energy Communities program, but the important thing for everybody this afternoon to understand is that there is assistance provided through these Clean Energy Community coordinators to assist in looking at your options for LED streetlights. And so next slide, Pat. Then this slide and the following slides list the coordinators for the different regions. So, you know, Pat will be providing these slides for you all after the presentation, so you can have contact information for the coordinator in your region, and feel free to reach out to them for this type of technical assistance that we'll be kind of discussing throughout the rest of this presentation. If you'd like assistance with this or any of the other action items, don't hesitate to contact these folks.
Thank you. Thanks, Amanda. Okay. Before Jen and Amanda get started on the economics, I just want to mention that we would love it if you would ask questions as they occur to you. We'll be taking questions from the audience and dealing with those probably toward the end. But we had a morning session with the Energy Smart coordinators, and it was really lively because they just peppered us with questions as they came to them. And so we may ask you to come up here because of the mic situation, or I'll repeat the question. But by all means, just raise your hand when you think of something. All right. Jen Metzger, welcome from Rosendale, Ulster County.
Thanks. So I just wanted to note that in addition to being a partner in this project, my other hat is I am, like you, a municipal official. I serve the town council in my town and the town of Rosendale. And we got our clean energy community status, and we are planning to put our $50,000 award to the conversion of our streetlights. So I'm living through this as well as talking to you about it as someone who's studied it. So there are these 2 main pathways to LED conversion in New York. One is to upgrade to utility LEDs. These are very new options in New York. Most utilities have utility options available. NYSERDA does not quite, but they proposed options and they will become available in December. But you know, there's not a lot of information out there on these utility options. And then the other possible pathway to LED conversion is by purchasing the streetlight system and converting to LEDs. And a recent change to state law has made it easier for communities to purchase their systems. So these are great new options that are available, but there's not a lot of information out there about them. So we undertook a very comprehensive analysis of these 2 alternative pathways for municipalities in our region, in the Mid-Hudson region, which includes the Central Hudson, ONR, and NYSEG. In today's discussion, I'm just going to focus on NYSEG because that's what's relevant to your geographic area. And my fellow presenter, Amanda, will cover National Grid, which she is an expert in, so between us, we should have the region covered. So before getting into the specific sort of utility options, I want us to just take a step back and sort of set the stage by, looking at, what are the considerations that local officials, that like local governments care about when trying to make a decision about which pathway to take. Next slide. There we go. So, there are this range of considerations, that are important to all of us. We may, different communities may give different factors lesser or more weight, but, we want to give you with enough information about each of these considerations that you can make an informed decision. So, of course, we're all, as local governments, concerned about the costs and the potential cost savings. How do the annual costs compare under utility ownership and municipal ownership scenarios? We found in our analysis that local governments will see savings from converting to LEDs in both, by taking either of those pathways, municipal ownership or going with utility options. But we found substantially greater long-term savings if you purchase your streetlights from the utility and convert to your own LEDs. And we'll look at the NYSERDA example in a moment. Energy savings are also important to us, many of us, not just because that also translates into cost savings, but because it helps us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. It's good for the climate. The energy savings that can be realized under the two scenarios is also different. Again, you'll see substantial energy savings under both through both pathways to LED conversion, and this is just by virtue of LED technology is so superior, so super efficient over existing lights that you're guaranteed some energy savings, or a good deal of energy savings. But if you choose to purchase your street light system and convert to LEDs on your own, you can see even greater savings because you're not locked into the limited wattage choices that the utility offers. You can get you can size your LEDs more appropriately to your needs, and this often results in additional energy savings. In terms of there are other factors we consider in terms of your lighting choices. Wattages I mentioned. Local governments, communities also care about the quality of the light, the color of the light. With the utility options, you get what they have available. And if you are purchasing the LEDs yourself, you have more control over those options. So, for instance, some communities want a warmer light color, that's measured in terms of, if the measurement is kelvins, and the lower the Kelvin level, the warmer the lights. The utility options almost universally are about 4,000 kelvins, which is kind of a neutral daylight color. But some communities have gone for a 3,000 Kelvin to more closely approximate like that warmer feeling of the older lights. Another difference in terms of lighting choices, another consideration is advanced control options, which George is going to talk about later. There are no advanced control options for utility owned LEDs. Of course, if you're purchasing the lights, you can take advantage of those control options. Another consideration in choosing your pathway to conversion is how quickly you can do it. The utilities have in their tariffs, which are the rules and policies that govern everything and rates that got, they have all set a minimum number of lights, percentage of lights that they're committed to converting to LEDs per year. And that minimum has been 15%. So in the absolute worst case, where they will only convert 15% a year, it will take you 7 years to convert your lights to LEDs. But it's up to the utility's discretion, and if you are going to convert to LEDs, you should have a conversation with them and try to, you may be able to get it done all within 1 year. But again, you as a local government don't have control over that decision. That is a utility decision. If you are, converting the lights yourself, of course, you can do that much more quickly. Once you have a contract with an installer, it's a matter of weeks or months, depending on how many lights you have. And then finally, and we don't want to minimize this factor, is the convenience factor. We haven't owned our streetlights typically in the past. Most municipalities in New York do not own their own streetlights, and it's been pretty hands off. The utilities are responsible for managing it. When you take over the lights, you now have the responsibility of maintaining them. I do want to point out that I just want to point out that a big difference between LED technology and the existing lights is that they have a much longer lifespan, 20 to 25 years, a very, very low initial failure rate, around 1%. So the O&M costs, operation and maintenance costs of street lighting has dropped dramatically with the conversion of LEDs. With high pressure sodium lights, you have to change the bulbs every 5 or 6 years. So it's more of a constant thing, and those costs are greater. So really, there's in some ways no better time to take over streetlight ownership. Okay, next slide. Okay, I just wanted to go over some of the mechanics of upgrading to utility-owned lights. First off, a local government, if you want to upgrade to the utilities LEDs, you have to request that. The utilities are not going to automatically upgrade to LEDs unless the light is at the end, the existing light is at the end of its useful life, and that can take a very long time. The reason for that is that the existing lights still have value on the utility's books. So by taking the lights out of service prematurely, the utility incurs a loss. So the Public Service Commission is actually required that towns that wish to upgrade to the utilities LEDs have to pay what's called the stranded costs of the lights being replaced. It's a one-time cost that represents the remaining undepreciated value of the lights that are being taken out of service and replaced with LEDs. Okay, I already talked about the fact that the utilities tariffs speak to the pace of conversion, which you'll have to take up directly with the utility. But one other important point is that the Public Service Commission has directed utilities to allow municipalities to choose which of the utilities' LED wattages to install where. So this will become clear when I talk about NYSEG's proposed options. But in general, we found that the utilities' LED replacement wattages are often higher than they need to be. So if you get to choose lower wattages for certain replacements, you can save additional energy and money rather than just following their one-for-one replacement strategy. But to really do that, you have to undertake an assessment of your street lighting needs, and we can talk about we will later in this presentation, I think, talk about how you can undertake those kinds of assessments. Next slide. Okay, as I mentioned, NYSEG does not yet have LED options available, but it has submitted a proposal to the Public Service Commission that that is going to be approved by December. The Public Service Commission is likely going to require some modifications to that proposal, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But the utility, NYSEG has proposed 4 LED wattages to replace its 7 most common light types and wattages. These LEDs are 4,000 Kelvin fixtures, which, as I mentioned, is a more neutral kind of daylight color. By converting to these options, our assessment has found that you will see energy savings of as much as 66% on average over the existing fixtures, so that's pretty good. Some of these wattages, even still, some of these light wattages are oversized for the lights they've been replacing, and we submitted comments on NYSEG's tariff to the Public Service Commission recommending lower wattage replacements in some cases, and it's very possible that the Commission will add an additional require that NYSEG add an additional, maybe a 5th LED option that's at a lower wattage, because it has done that in other utility cases. So we could see, when it's finally approved, a better selection of utility wattages. In terms of stranded costs, the NYSEG has proposed to basically determine that cost on a case-by-case basis based on the net book value of the municipality's existing lights. Again, this is a one-time cost that would have to be paid to convert to LEDs. With regard to the rates, so you pay you can think of it as a rental charge. It's your annual fixture rate per fixture, and that is by far your biggest cost of street lighting, is that annual fixture rate that you pay. The proposed rates for NYSEG's LEDs, some of the LEDs are more expensive than the existing lights, some of them are less expensive, but when we put it all together, including the energy savings that you would get from converting, we estimate that you would see an average of 10 to 15% reduction in your street lighting bills from converting to their LED options. Their proposed LED options. I want to emphasize that because the Public Service Commission, in reviewing other utilities' LED options, took issue with some of the assumptions that the utilities were making when they set these rates, and which actually ended up bringing the rates down even more. And I expect that to happen in NYSEG's case. So you may see, so the actual bill savings may actually be greater by the time the tariff is approved. Next slide. So how does this compare with the municipal ownership pathway? Our analysis found that with municipal ownership, you would see a 70 to 75% annual bill reduction after you purchase the streetlights and convert to LEDs. So that's, of course, a huge savings compared to the 10 to 15% that I was just referring to under the utility ownership option. This has to do, again, with the fact that much of your street lighting costs are from renting your street lights from the utility. So those costs, go away. You have other costs because you have to maintain the lights yourself. You have to pay a pole rental fee. We can get into these things. but those costs don't come anywhere near to what you're paying the utility right now. And we estimate the payback period on that investment to be between 5 and 7 years. This is going to depend on the utilities, on how much it costs to buy your streetlight system. It can vary. We looked at a couple of cases in NYSEG territory of communities that purchased their systems already. Horseheads, Village of Horseheads, the average cost per light was $101 for the old lights from NYSEG. In West Seneca, the town paid municipality paid $250 per light per average. So it's a range. It depends on the age and composition of your lighting inventory. But again, the savings are quite big. And I think that wraps it up for this piece of it. And Amanda can tell us about National Grid.
Sure. So I'll just discuss the same kind of information that Jen just went through, but for National Grid territory communities. So for the utility-owned pathway option, it is currently available in National Grid territory and has been since June of last year. They do charge the stranded asset fee based on the average net book value of your current life now, which is determined on a case-by-case basis. So we've seen a wide range of what this number could be, as low as $49 per light to as high as $399 per light. So it really is a case-by-case type of figure that you will need to request from National Grid. But they have been able to provide these figures to us relatively quickly. Really hasn't taken more than a couple of weeks for them to get back to us, at most, with these figures for the utility-owned option. In National Grid's case, all of the energy prices for the supply and delivery of the LED options are lower than what you are currently paying for your existing lights, but all of the LED facility fees are actually higher than your existing lights. And National Grid's rationale for that is that they have to pay more up front to purchase the LEDs than they currently do for the high pressure sodium or other types of lights that they may use. So in order to recover those costs over time, those monthly facility fees are higher. The bill reductions because of this are usually only between 10 and 20% after the stranded asset costs are included, even though the energy savings themselves in terms of kilowatt hour savings are in the range of 70 to 80%. And again, that's because the facility fees do increase. So your actual bill dollar savings are only going to be between 10 and 20%, which is similar to what Jen was discussing as far as the proposed NYSEG tariff. One other thing I wanted to mention about this utility-owned option for National Grid is that while Jen was mentioning before with the other utilities, they have that percentage that they will convert per year. National Grid has a similar but slightly different method of deciding how many lights per year they will convert, and it's not based on a percentage per municipality. It's actually I believe it's 15% of all of their street lights throughout New York State that they will convert per year. So if a community asks to convert their street lights, typically they would request, if they were a smaller community, they would request converting all of their street lights, and National Grid would happily do that, and in fact requires a conversion of at least 15% of their lights or 100 lights, whichever is greater. So, but they do have a cap like the other utilities, but it's just based on all of their streetlights as opposed to streetlights per municipality for what they will convert each year.
And so I just wanted to mention that actually NYSERDA has proposed the same, which is different from the other utilities, which do it on a municipality by municipality.
Right. Okay, next slide, please. So the municipal pathway in National Grid territory is a little more uncertain because nobody in National Grid territory has yet purchased their streetlights and converted to LEDs. In fact, I think National Grid said the other day that nobody has purchased their streetlights at all, regardless of converting to LEDs. So these figures that you see on this slide are all based on discussions that we are currently having with National Grid and some of the municipalities in central New York. So, nothing is really certain yet, but this is what we're seeing so far. So based on the numbers we've seen, we estimate annual bill reductions for the municipal ownership model of 75 to 85% versus the 10 to 20% under the utility-owned LED option. And the payback period on investment we're estimating at about 5 to 10 years, depending on your utility purchase price, which in National Grid is significantly higher than what Jen mentioned for NYSEG of $250 per streetlight. What we've seen quoted for municipalities in National Grid territory is significantly higher. Unfortunately, I can't share any of those numbers with you exactly at the moment because they are all subject to non-disclosure agreements, which the other municipalities do not have in place. But once any purchases do go through the Public Service Commission approval process, it will become public knowledge. So at that point, we'll be able to share what the actual prices are. But just be rest assured that you can expect to see a much higher number, at least upon their initial purchase price quote. But that is to say that you can still negotiate with National Grid, and we're in the process of some negotiations now. Not exactly sure how much National Grid will be willing to work with the municipalities, but of course it is something that you should at least work with your, whoever is assisting you in this process, or with your municipal officials and the utility to come to an agreement that works for both of you. Next slide, please. So if you do decide that the municipal ownership option is the right option for your community, the purchase of the streetlight system, like I was just saying, is negotiated between the utility and municipality. And there are some, this is a streamlined process with some required timeframes and requirements that the Public Service Commission set forth in November of 2015. So next slide, please. So the first step is for the municipality to request your purchase price quote. The utility then has 90 days to respond with that quote. And at least in National Grid territory, it has been taking them the full 90 days to respond. So I would make sure to put that into your timeline when you're considering, how long this whole process could take. They have been taking that full 90 days. Then the town will notify the utilities within 180 days that they want to proceed with purchasing their streetlight system. There is a negotiation period here with the utility. So what we've heard from the utilities basically is that you don't have to fully commit and have an agreement on what that exact purchase price will be upon that 180-day period ending, but you do have to at least discuss with the utility that you are planning to move forward, just letting them know that you're still interested in purchasing, and you can continue with those negotiations. Once the utility and the municipality reach an agreement on a purchase price, they will enter into an operating agreement, and in most cases also an attachment agreement, a pole attachment agreement. So where the utility is still most likely going to own most of the poles, the municipality will be owning, the streetlights that are attached onto those poles, and so the utility has certain requirements that the municipality will have to agree to ahead of time. And then the Public Service Commission will have to approve this sale, and Jen, I think you can go into some more detail again about what that entails.
Yes, if the purchase, this is in public service law, if the purchase of your streetlights system from the utility costs under $100,000, which can be the case if you don't have very many lights, or the Public Service Commission, if it takes 90 days have to pass, and the it has to be sit with the Public Service Commission for 90 days. If they take no action on it, it's just automatically approved after 90 days. But if the sale, if the purchase price is over $100,000, this requires affirmative action by the commission. They have to, review it and either say yes, go ahead, or no, which we've never seen happen. We've never seen them say no. But that adds time to that process, and that's why it can take up to 6 months or so. Okay, and then just a few last bits of information about purchasing the streetlight system. The utilities all use different methods for calculating. Each utility has its own method for calculating the purchase price, or providing you with an estimate. NYSEG uses a methodology called present value of return on assets, or PVROA, and it takes into account the net book value as well as the utility's expected future return on the streetlights if it continued to own them. So, it tries to it factors in that cost plus an administrative cost. You have the right to request that the utility not only give you an estimate, but provide you with the information and data that went into making that estimate, so that you can make an informed judgment about whether that's or as much of an informed judgment as you can about whether that price is acceptable. So we recommend that when you do request the purchase price, you also ask your utility to at the same time provide you with all of the information, be transparent about it, so that you can really review that price from a position of knowledge. Another piece of advice is to just make sure you carefully review the utility's proposed operating agreement. Keep in mind that the operating agreement is going to spell out all of the rights and responsibilities of you, the municipality, as the owner of the streetlight system, and the utility, and what the utility continues to be responsible for. And that document is a negotiable document. The provisions are negotiable. It's not a hugely complex thing. It's fairly straightforward, but just keep that in mind. I'll just give you one example. The utility may say, you have to have some provisions where you would have to pay the utility for something in X number of days, 5 days or 10 days. That's typically like out of alignment with municipal billing cycles, so you'd want to change that to 30 or 60 days, things like that, which you will catch. But make sure your municipal attorney reads that, gives that agreement a thorough review. And this is just, there's been a number of cities and towns that have purchased their systems their streetlight systems successfully and happily in our area. Some of the bigger cities, Poughkeepsie, Kingston, Beacon, and others downstate, and then more upstate, the West Seneca and Horseheads. I did at one point when I was doing research for the assessment, had a conversation with I was either the mayor or supervisor of Horseheads, but they were very happy with the results of taking over their system and converting to LEDs. They feel like it was the right thing to do. It saved them a lot of money. I just wanted to close with one more kind of with an example, just to give you a more concrete idea of costs and savings. As I mentioned, my own town is embarking on this process, and so I did a cost analysis for our town, for our street lighting, and we have 165 street lights. It's not a lot of street lights. It's probably not too different from many small communities. We pay for those 165 lights in 2017 over $40,000 for the year to the utility for those lights. Most of that cost is the fixture rental cost. Once we purchase our street lights and convert to LEDs, those costs are going to drop to $7,000. We estimate around $7,200 a year. So it's a big difference. And I'll stop there.
All right, thanks, Jen. We do have just one more slide, and the same situation as this morning. We're about out of time, but if you want to just say a little bit about this.
Well, this just covers. This is the guide that we have produced, a common sense guide for local governments in the Mid-Hudson region, but it is of value to local governments outside of the Mid-Hudson region because a lot of the issues are the same. And these, it just covers the topics of, the benefits of LED conversions, what your options are, an analysis of the pathways. I've given you like the high level kind of conclusions of that analysis, and then procurement and financing, and you're going to get hear the summary of those findings as well from our next speakers in comparison of the options. So this is, we can share with you the last chapter. Have we shared the last chapter?
Not with the municipal officials, no.
So,
but we can.
That it's in the finalization stages. It should be available, I would say in the next month or so, the entire assessment. We can share the last chapter, which is not only summarizes the whole thing, but does it in a way that that's kind of like a step-by-step guide to pursuing LED conversions.
Terrific. So thanks, Jen.
Just sit for draft.
Thanks, Jen.
Sure.
All right, so we are scheduled for a break, but on the other hand, you haven't been here that long, so you're welcome. We have cookies and coffee, and you can come and go and do that. We have a couple of questions that have come in. I think you've addressed them, but I want to open it up to this group. Have you heard anything? Yes.
I'm Beryl Conway from the little town of Wilmington. We have like 180 streetlights.
Yeah.
And I think we spend a little more than $20,000 a year on our electricity bill for those lights. But my question is, when the streetlights were originally planned and designed, like, does this take into account a redesign in some cases? Because we don't need 180 lights.
Right. So we'll be addressing that in subsequent remarks. So the question is, were you able to hear it, Jen? Did it?
Do you need that many streetlights? Right.
Well, yeah, but somebody to look at the design.
Yes.
Too.
Well, what are the design parameters of this conversion? But George will address that. Yeah. It's coming. What else? What else? Did everybody have a cookie?
Has anybody assessed, when they go through and they do a total assessment of their street lighting, have they ever thought of putting their own poles in, so they're getting totally away from the utility, because you say one of the most expensive parts of your street lighting is the pole rental. Has anybody done any cost analysis to say, okay, you know what, maybe we'll own our poles and our street lighting?
So here comes George, up to the podium.
I was gonna say, the pole rental is not, I mean, it's an annoying cost, I don't feel like we should have to pay, but anyway, but it's not an enormous cost. And we factored that cost into our analyses, so it's already in there, and you're still seeing all of those savings. In NYSERDA territory, I believe the West Seneca price per light that I quoted earlier of $250 per light was a bit higher, in part because they also purchased some poles. So I think in the case of NYSEG, at least, you may purchase your poles along with your lights. You can't do that in every utility service territory, but
Yeah, so in National Grid territory, you would only be purchasing your lights as a municipality if that pole was used strictly for street lighting, which is not the case in most cases. So, you know, you may purchase a couple of poles, but some communities, especially smaller communities, might purchase no poles. And so that's where that pole attachment fee comes in. But that's only about $7 per year for the poles. So it's a minimal cost to have that pole attachment fee. So, you know, there's no reason in that case really to purchase or construct your own poles.
Any other questions?
Are you going to address, I mean, the confusion, there's still a confusion on the bills I've seen, it's mainly facility charge, and so most of that charge is not the pole rental, there's other stuff rolled into it.
What service territory are you in?
National Grid. Actually, I'm in both. We have a small portion in New York State Electric and Gas, but the majority of them are all in National
Because
Grid.
as far as I know, NGrid does not have a pole attachment fee.
Okay.
So
So,
there is a pole attachment fee for National Grid if you were to buy your system. The pole attachment fee is about $7 a year. It's 60 cents per light per month for the pole attachment fee. But I couldn't really hear what the other questions were, but I think there's kind of a question about the facility fees that we were talking about. Those facility fees that would go away includes everything except for that 60 cent per light pole attachment fee. So you would no longer be paying for the rentals for the luminaire and the lamp and the arm and any of the bracketing and foundation. So all of those separate pieces would go away if you were to purchase your street light system. So I think that was kind of where the question lies, was the pole rental versus everything else.
Pat,
Yes.
I have to hop off.
Right.
and get on a webinar.
All right. Thanks, Jen.
Well, take over.
All right. Take care.
what's fascinating about this to me is National Grid attempted to impose a pole attachment fee en masse, and we defeated them at the Public Service Commission because the costs and operation of that pole is part of the distribution system and it's built into the electric rates. So in essence, you're being double charged. In addition to that, we threatened to charge them a pole placement fee for every pole in the public way. So if you want to charge us to rent space on your pole, we're going to charge you to rent space in our town. And we made it go away. So in the next rate case, I'd suggest we intervene and make that pole rental or the pole attachment fee go away, because it can't be justified based on the way rates are structured. So anyway. Am I up
You're
there?
good. You're good.
Okay.
Yes.
So what I want to do is kind of walk you through real quickly what the process is, from a technical standpoint of getting from where you are now to owning your lights and operating your lights. So I'm going to do that, and then the other thing is the support that we're currently providing to communities. Go back here. So there's two ways to go about the process of getting your lights converted. One is a community-managed approach, and the other is a turnkey approach. Now, turnkey is basically where you hire a general contractor who's experienced in this sort of thing, and he basically handles it for you. You tell him what you want, he gets it done. Hires the contractor, supervises the contractor, handles all the paperwork, and so on and so forth. Under the community-managed approach,
Right in the middle, stand in the middle so they can see you.
oh,
Yeah.
she wants me to be seen?
Yes.
I'm not used to being locked down to a particular place. I like to wander around the room and interact with my audience. Anyway, so under the community managed approach, there's a whole series of individual steps, and we'll talk you through each one of those steps. Okay? But you're very involved in the process, and you have to commit some time to it, or have some volunteers that are willing to commit some time, and they need to have some capability. You don't want just anybody doing this. So what we're doing now as a group, the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium, is we've already developed an RFP for a community-managed approach, which basically is what you would use to hire the contractor who come in and do the installation, conversion work, and then be available to you for follow-on maintenance once the streetlights are converted. So he'd be your on-call service afterwards. Under the community-managed approach, you purchase your materials through a state bid. So you don't advertise and bid it. You actually select the material you want, negotiate the price, and purchase it through an approved state vendor. So for example, in Massachusetts, we have what's called FAC 76. And the Comptroller General has ruled that anybody in any state wants to take advantage of that bid process that they've already gone through, they can purchase through the approved vendors. Now, the way I do it is I negotiate directly with the manufacturer. As a part of the process, we're also developing a turnkey approach, because a lot of communities simply don't want to take this on, and they're willing to pay the extra 20% or so to have somebody else take care of everything that they can just make one phone call and the problems are taken care of. So we're developing a separate RFP for that turnkey approach, which is going to be designed somewhat like a menu where you have the different things that need to be done, and you can either do one or all of those. You can opt to do one of them yourself. For example, you could do your own audit and then just give them the results of the audit, and they'll do the design for you. And then the way these are structured is we're going to allow piggybacking for up to 1 year. And the reason we've limited it to 1 year is because the technology is changing so dramatically. And you know, if people try to piggyback on, I mean, people are piggybacking on the one that was done in Yonkers 5 or 6 years ago, and they're still paying those prices. The price of an LED has gone from $250 to $110 in the interim, and you want to be able to take advantage of that. In addition, the technology has changed dramatically. So that's why we did it that way. All this is you'll have access to these slides, and you'll also have access to the RFPs that we're developing once they become approved, and you can use them yourselves, modify them to suit your particular needs, but at least it covers in detail the legal and the technological requirements that you need to have to put into an RFP. So that's the bulk of the work. You'll have to deal with your own individual community nuances. So this just compares the two processes, and this is available to you.
On our website.
On the it's also on our website. So there's a number of things. There's a lot of useful information that Pat's put on our website that's available. So what we're now going to do is talk about the financing options, and Nina's going to take this for us.
Absolutely. Hello, Nina. All right, this is Nina Orville down in Dobbs Ferry, Westchester County.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to talk briefly about some of the different financing approaches that are available for municipalities to use in completing a conversion of their streetlights. And the good news is that there are a number of choices for municipalities. And as we spoke with municipalities that have employed these various financing approaches, what we found was that all the municipalities that I spoke with were really pleased with the option that they had selected. So it's important to bear in mind there isn't one right answer for all the municipalities. It's a question of assessing what's right for you. So among the options are municipal finance, municipal leasing, and then the two other bullets here, energy performance contracts and New York Power Authority services, which are really, they're not strictly financing options, but they're really procurement strategies that are available that may include financing. So it's important to know also that the cost to acquire your municipality's existing streetlights, if that's a necessary part of your project, can be bundled into any of these financing approaches or may be funded separately by the municipality as you determine. Next slide. So the municipal finance option is one that has been used by quite a few munis, and it includes use of bonds or bond anticipation notes principally. And some of the characteristics include the fact that the bond anticipation notes or bands are very low cost. They're also short term. They can be renewed for up to 5 years. And bonds, and they have low interest rates and relatively low transaction costs. Bonds have low interest rates, as you know, but very high transaction costs, and aren't going to function well as a standalone financing strategy for streetlights unless you're talking about a streetlight conversion for a really large municipality with a lot of lights. Typically, instead, bonds would be issued for a portfolio of projects, including streetlights. With both of these instruments, you're impacting your borrowing capacity and your debt rating, which is an important consideration for a lot of municipalities. Some municipalities have also used self-funding techniques, including use of capital funds or operational funds to convert their streetlights. And some of the things to consider in terms of this approach are it's likely to result in incremental conversion, and therefore a municipality is likely to lose the economies of scale that they may gain by doing the conversion all at once. And that also means deferring the opportunity to capture all the savings that are available by converting your lights. So you're getting those advantages more slowly over time. And also, a lot of municipalities don't have the budget flexibility to accommodate this strategy. Okay, the next slide. A couple of different municipalities that have used municipal finance to move forward with streetlight conversion include the City of Kingston, which in 2015 authorized bonding to acquire over 2,000 utility-owned streetlights, plus conversion of several hundred streetlights that the city already owned. And the PSC approved the acquisition of the lights by the city this past spring, and the City of Kingston is working with the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium on conversion of those lights going forward. The next example is my own municipality of Dobbs Ferry. Now, Dobbs Ferry, as a Westchester municipality located in Con Ed service territory, already owned its own streetlights. And therefore only had to finance the conversion of those lights to LED. And the village chose to do that in 2 phases. In 2011, the village was the first municipality, at least in the region, maybe in New York State, to convert a significant number of its streetlights to LED. And it did that through issuance of a bond anticipation note. And in that case, the municipality decided to install the lights itself using municipal staff. And the 3-year payback was significantly shorter than the financing instrument that was used. And then last year, the village completed the conversion of its streetlights. It chose to piggyback on a contract. Actually, George had mentioned that municipalities were still piggybacking on the city of Yonkers contract, but it was actually New Rochelle that provided a piggyback opportunity, which a lot of municipalities, including Dobbs Ferry, took advantage of. And the second phase of conversion was financed with capital funds, including, since the cost of the conversion of the first half of the lights was less than had been anticipated, there was some funds still remaining that had been appropriated for that first project. And again, a bond anticipation note. And with the second phase of conversion, the village decided to have the contractor install the lights because it had taken a very prolonged period of time for the municipal staff to do it themselves under the first phase. So they decided to accelerate the process to complete the project. Next slide. Another strategy, or one strategy that some municipalities have used to complete the streetlight conversion is use of an energy performance contract. And energy performance contracts enable projects to be financed through the savings that will result from that project, something that's regulated by New York State energy law. And key characteristics include that it's a turnkey project. The energy services company may help coordinate financing. They won't provide it themselves. And there are guaranteed savings that result from the project that are required as the basis, again, for financing the project. This isn't a strategy that works for very small projects, and as we'll discuss, isn't necessarily the most cost-effective way to move forward with a simple, straight-ahead streetlight conversion project. So one example is, if you could move forward, Pat, the city of Yonkers, which converted its 12,000 streetlights. They issued the RFP now 5 years ago for an energy performance contract. And as is true with an energy performance contract, it was for complete turnkey services, including investment grade audit, procurement, and installation of the lights. And the $8.7 million cost of the project was financed through a lease, a 10-year lease. And the city was very pleased with the results from that, with net savings of almost $1 million a year after the finance costs, and a reduction of municipal greenhouse gas emissions by about 10%. And one more energy performance contract that I'll just mention, we don't have a slide for it, is the town of Mamaroneck, where they used an energy performance contract for a whole portfolio of projects. And they used the savings from the streetlights component of that portfolio to fund other energy projects that they wanted to accomplish, that didn't have as significant savings associated with them. So that includes projects like installing new generators, for instance, that provide no savings, no energy savings, but were important in terms of meeting the objectives of the town from an energy perspective. So the next strategy that we'll talk about, and Pat, are you hearing an echo on your end?
Yeah, I don't know what's different.
I'll let you see whether you can identify it. Is it too distracting?
Nope, nope, it's fine.
Okay. So the next approach that we'll talk about is a tax-exempt municipal lease, also known as tax-exempt lease purchase. And this is a strategy that's often used to finance energy performance contracts, but it's a financing approach that can be used on its own. And as George has indicated, the majority of the streetlight conversion projects that he works on in other states are financed in this way. So key characteristics include that the lessor provides the lessee funds to purchase the equipment and to fund the whole conversion project. And the lessor then takes a security interest in the equipment. The lessor is repaid through the lease payments, and the lessee of the municipality builds equity over time and owns the equipment outright at the end of the lease term. So structured correctly, the municipal lease is not considered debt, so it doesn't impact borrowing capacity or credit rating. It's an annual expenditure. And some other real benefits are the flexibility of this approach. So the term can be matched to the needs of a particular project. The transaction costs are very low. The interest rates are low. And there's a lot of flexibility also in terms of the size of the funding that's sought. So in a conversation with one company that's very active in this area, they indicated that they will fund projects as small as $25,000. So that's important to bear in mind. And this is an approach that we would certainly recommend municipalities consider when they're thinking about this kind of conversion project.
Great.
Next slide. So as I mentioned before, in conversations with municipalities throughout the region that have acquired the streetlights or that have completed the conversion of the streetlights, they approach that in a range of ways in terms of the financing strategy they used, and all of them indicated they were really pleased with the way they approached the project. So it's a question of considering the characteristics of these different financing options and determining which is the best fit for your municipality, taking into account considerations such as, of course, the cost of the financing, both the interest rate and, very importantly, in some cases, the transaction costs, any impact on municipal borrowing capacity, the term that you're seeking. And one of the things that municipalities will think about is what the optimal financing term is relative to the payback period for the project. So some municipalities have matched the financing term with the payback, with the estimated payback for the project, essentially letting the project pay for itself in the same amount of time as the term of the financing. Other municipalities have opted to select a more extended financing term and to generate some cash flow from the savings from the project during the term of financing. Something else just to think about relative to the option of an energy performance contract is the value of that guarantee. And when LED streetlight conversion projects were more new and were less tested and understood, the value of the guarantee that you can get through that strategy was more significant than the value is now. When the savings from an LED conversion project that's done well with a good contractor and with good equipment, et cetera, you essentially, a municipality can be very comfortable with what the savings are that will be achieved from that project. So the value of that guarantee falls off in that case. Where that may not be true is in the case of the town of Mamaroneck, for example, when you're using an energy performance contract for a whole portfolio of energy projects. And you want to ensure that the total aggregate savings are sufficient to pay for that full portfolio of projects. A final point is that with the collaborative approach that we're taking through the Mid-Hudson Streetlight Consortium, our goal is to help municipalities reduce the project costs, which of course then reduces the amount that needs to be financed to effect conversion. So that's one of the goals that we have and one of the benefits that participating communities will have. Pat, should we talk about NYPA?
We certainly can, yeah.
Okay, so the final component of this is New York Power Authority has a streetlight conversion, offers streetlight conversion services. Again, it's a turnkey approach, including procurement, design, and project management, with everything overseen by NYPA. There's low-cost financing through the use of a municipal lease, as would be true in general with use of a municipal lease. The savings are equal to or greater than those payments. And again, as is true with all these other approaches, the acquisition of these existing streetlights can be included in the project. So the NYPA approach is just one variant of the turnkey strategy that George talked about previously.
One of this group, what's the size of those projects?
Right, so a NYPA project would start at 400 lights and up. They're not able to accommodate smaller municipalities, although there has been some talk of them aggregating projects, but we don't know that that's actually occurred.
Thanks, Pat.
Sure. All right, so there's NYPA contact information. And we are going to take a break now. So you're, oh, I'm sorry, should I go back to the NYPA contact? Hold on. There. North Country, right? North Country, whoops. Okay. We are going to take a short break now, so we invite you to have some coffee, or there's tea and there's cookies, and we're just going to circle informally now and see, you know, what you think, what questions you'd like us to address in the next part, and we'll be hearing from George on technology considerations, but we really would love your questions.
So just a quick note, if you look at the example of Yonkers, where they spent $8.7 million to do 12,000 streetlights, that's an average install cost of $762 per light. That's a straight LED conversion, no control system. Last year we did the city of Providence using the approach that I like, which is a kind of a community managed or centrally managed. approach, not a turnkey. And we installed 16,780 lights for a cost of $8.1 million, including a full control system, which doubles the cost of the materials. Our average install cost then is under $500 a light. That tells you what it costs when you do turnkey.
Right, so prices have certainly fallen.
So for those of you who are with us by phone, I'm putting up the NY Streetlights website, so you may want to take a look through it while we are taking a quick break.
Just real quick, for those of you that don't necessarily know this, I'm a retired Army colonel. Spent 26 years, graduated from West Point, became a public works director, and did that for a number of years, and then I became a street lighting consultant. And I also serve on the American National Standards Institute for outdoor lighting. So I help set the standards for how these lights are designed and built and tested and that sort of thing. And over the course of 17 years, I've probably helped 125 communities acquire their street lighting assets. I've written the laws in 3 states that force utilities to sell their street lighting assets. I've served as an expert witness in rates and tariff cases. So I bring this kind of mixed bag of experience to the table, which I think has really helped me be a better consultant, because you can take the DPW out of me, or you take me out of the DPW, but you can't get the DPW out of me. I still look at this from your perspective. That's how I see it. And as I see, my role is to help you make informed decisions and to guide you to the lowest possible cost, so that the taxpayers get the benefit of your decisions. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, you can do all kinds of energy efficiency projects, change the boilers, do the interior lighting, all of these kinds of things. Nobody notices. But you change your street lights, everybody notices. So it's an opportunity for you to rebrand your community and do it in a way that is visible to every citizen of how you're committed to helping save money and make life better for them. So there's no project that's more rewarding, really, than doing your street lights, in my experience. So it's important that you do it right. So what I want to do is to walk you through the process, and it starts with understanding what you have, and then figuring out how you're going to change it, what it's going to look like when you're done. And then lastly, whether or not you want to install a sophisticated control system and start getting involved in what they call the Internet of Things, or smart cities. So why do you do an audit? There's 3 fundamental reasons you do an audit. The first of these is you want to verify that the utility's been billing you correctly, so you know what you're buying. Number 2, you need information about your system to help you decide on the design. The question that was asked, do I need this light? Do I not need this light? Does it need to be brighter than it is, or can it be darker? So you want to gather the information you need about design. Now, an interesting thing is if you've got somebody out in the field recording information already, the City of Providence asked us while we were auditing their system to also record sidewalk issues and catch basin issues and manhole covers. So we had the auditors use the same platform that they were collecting the data on the streetlights to put a condition index for each of these other things, and then where there were specific conditions to actually take a photograph. So now we had a layer within our GIS database where you could click and see what the condition was in that layer. So you could take advantage of the fact that you're out walking every street and get this other information for only a marginal increase in cost versus doing the rigor audit. So the other thing about design considerations is a couple things. Realize that this is a come-as-you-are party. I guarantee you nobody did a street lighting design and determined what the average foot candles would be and all of that sort of thing before they put that light up there. The pole's where it is because it's based on the span distance from the next pole and the strength of the wire and how much it sags. It has nothing to do with light distribution. So the lights were put where the poles were and where people asked for them. And generally got built over time is a city council said, well, we need more light in this area, so they asked the utility to come out and put up some more lights, so more lights got put up. Then you also have Mrs. Smith, who's 89 years old, and she's feeling insecure, and she asked her councilman to make that light in front of her house brighter because she didn't feel safe. And so now, in the middle of this neighborhood full of 70-watt lights, there's a 250-watt light. And Mrs. Smith is now in the Elmwood Cemetery, and she's been there for 13 years. So, but that light is still there, and it's still burning a lot of electricity, and it's really not benefiting the neighborhood. So these are the kinds of things you're going to be looking for when you're out auditing your lights. You're going to be looking for consistency within neighborhoods, consistency within roads, and that sort of thing. There's a document called IESNA, the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America, publishes their RP8-14 guidelines. And in it, there's a table that says if you're on a residential street with low pedestrian conflict, we want you to have an average of 0.3 of a foot candle with a max to min ratio of not greater than 6. So that's your target for design. But be very, very careful. Couple things. One is IESNA does not recognize the fact that a lumen from a low pressure sodium lamp and a lumen from a LED lamp, the human eye sees very differently. They treat every lumen as if it's the same, and yet there are studies that will show low pressure sodium light lumen takes 5 times as many to get the same visual clarity you get with a LED light because of color rendering and crispness. Identifying shadows and shapes and things is much clearer under a high color rendering source than under a poor color rendering source. The other thing you want to be careful of, I remember I was doing a project down in Florida and they said they wanted to adopt the DOT standards for their neighborhood, so they were going to try to achieve certain foot candle standards based on, you know, the neighborhood and where the lights were. And I said, whoa, 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 don't do that. The minute you adopt a standard, you're going to have lawyers out there with light meters suing you because you're not meeting your own standard for one reason or another. So you want to be very careful. There's no law that requires you to light your streets. So what you're going to do is establish general guidelines that you're going to follow. And the other thing you're going to do is some legal precedents around this is that when you, for example, down in Florida, there was a light that burned out. It was on a narrow alleyway. A young boy on his way to school bus stop who walks down that alleyway was hit and killed. And Florida Power and Light was sued, and they lost. They had to pay millions of dollars to the family because they couldn't show that they had a process for when they received the work order, when they processed the work order, when it was assigned to a crew, and so on and so forth. They just couldn't show that they had an organized process to solve this problem. On the other hand, there's a town in Massachusetts that turned off half of their lights to save money. They turned a light off because they said it wasn't necessary. Someone walked out underneath one of these lights that had been turned off and was killed, an elderly woman who had been attending a funeral, and her estate sued the town. Now, because this town had gone through a formal process with public comment and the whole thing, the court said, doesn't matter. Even if you made a bad decision, you're still indemnified against being sued. So there are a couple lessons there. One is if when you get ready to do your design, set it up as a guideline, not as a firm, fixed thing that you're going to try to do. And secondly, make sure as you go through this, you do a public process, right? That way, and get the public involved. That way you have your fallback. You've got your buffer. So this shows you the information that I like to collect when we're out there. The system that I use with my auditors is all done through an iPad. It uses a free application you can get from ArcGIS called Collector. Now, unfortunately, Collector doesn't have all the drop-down menus, but they'll allow you to use their software and everything. What we've done is we've built specific drop-down menus and stuff just for street lighting into the program that I use with my auditors, and then I maintain 50 licenses, and right now I got about 49 of them in use, even some in Jamaica. So this is the information we collect. You go out there, you just, everything's touch, so it's fairly quick. And a typical auditor can do 200 to 300 lights a day. It's best if it's done with 2 people, 1 person driving, 1 person recording, because if you're driving and trying to do it by yourself, the other way, of course, to do it is by walking. And if you're a small community with 40 or 100 or even 200 lights, you can walk that. Just start on one side of town and go to the other. And we can help. We have on our website, the
nystreetlights.org.
nystreetlights.org, a guide for how to do this, and it tells you what the information is to collect. The other reason why you do an audit of your lights is you're going to own an asset. So it's probably a good idea for you to know what that asset is. And if you later decide to install a control system, you'll need that information anyway as part of the control network, because that's all GIS based. So let's talk about LED technology. It's a little bit more complicated than a lot of folks realize. You don't just say, well, I've got this is a replacement LED that's the equivalent of a 100-watt incandescent light bulb, like when you go to Home Depot and you buy these, or they say it's the equivalent of. It's not like that. LED lights come with different color temperatures. What do they look like? You know what a BMW headlight looks like? That's 6,000 Kelvin. Very blue-white, really in your eye. And then you get an old-fashioned headlight, it's pretty yellow. That's 2,700 Kelvin. So it's more yellow. And so the correlated color temperature is is the color saturation coming out of the light. Now what's interesting about that is the AMA came out because LED lights produce white light because the LED chip is actually long wavelength blue or ultraviolet, and they embed it with phosphor. So it works the same as a fluorescent light fixture. The mix of phosphors that you put in there is what determines the color output of the LED. And as you add more phosphors, you can get to the warmer color temperatures. The drawback to that is as you add more phosphors in there, you're trapping more and more heat in the LED chip, which shortens its life expectancy. And in order to get the same amount of light out of it, you have to crank in more watts of electricity. AMA didn't consider that. More emissions from the power plants to power the 3,000 Kelvin lights that they're recommending. Lights have to be more of them built, more of them disposed of. They didn't take a life cycle picture of this thing. And in addition to that, the fact of the matter is that street light is outside on the street. And at night before you go to bed, you're inside, and you're dealing with incandescent light bulbs that have significantly greater amounts of the light output in the spectrum that interferes with your sleep than even LEDs do. So the real elephant in the room is your TV, your laptop, your telephone, your incandescent light bulbs, your fluorescent light bulbs, all of which have a lot more of the blue saturation than do LEDs. And the other piece of this is what you're really talking about is spectral power distribution, SPD. And what that says is that I've got a light source, and in order to create a color, I've got all these, you know how color works, you get all the colors blend together and they produce white light. But the amount of power that's being put into different spectrums can vary from light to light. And so you can have a 4,000 Kelvin light that has actually less light in that blue wavelength, the 480 nanometer wavelength that the AMA is concerned with, than a 3,000 Kelvin light. So it's important to understand that you need to look at the AMA's report with a certain level of understanding. And there's a very good article that was written by the Department of Energy by Pacific Northwest Laboratory. Again, it's posted on our website that talks about this issue. And then we have another one on SkyGlow and some of the things that we're doing. If you've ever seen the pictures of Los Angeles before and after with the SkyGlow, it's dramatic when they went to the LEDs. It's really an improvement. So read those articles. It's important to understand that, and you'll be able to address the questions. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, though, in terms of people's preferences, if you put up a warm color light and you put up a 4,000 Kelvin light, you're going to find that the general population likes that warm color temperature. They will vote in favor of the 3,000 Kelvin. Your DPW, police, and fire guys will say, no, 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 I like the 4,000 Kelvin. And they're right. There are studies that will show that your reaction time, visual clarity, and all the things that lead to higher levels of public safety are better with the 4,000 than they are with the 3,000. So one possibility you have is to use the 3,000 in the neighborhoods and use the 4,000 on your main thoroughfares. This is all part of your design consideration. Okay? Color rendering we've mentioned. Distribution pattern. LED lights can be purchased with a multiplicity of distribution patterns. Because it's all done optically, you have a type 2 distribution, which is long and narrow. And that spreads that light out and helps fill up the gaps between the lights and makes the light more uniform. Type 3 distribution is more elliptical. So a little more light across the way. So if you've got 4 lanes versus just 2 lanes, type 3 is probably a better choice. Type 5 is circular. So at an intersection where you only have a single light, you may want to use type 5 or type 3. Now my general guideline to you is if you don't want to have this mixed bag of lights on the shelf so that when one goes out you say, okay, which one of these 57 different styles do I need for that particular location, I'd recommend you go with a type 3 because that's a good universal application. The exception to that is where you've got very narrow streets with buildings that are right against the sidewalks like you find in many city situations. And in those instances, type 2 is better. The other thing is these lights can be equipped with backlight protection. This is a little shield that clips into them that prevents light from getting over into the second story window of the house behind the pole. And the nice thing about those is they can be snapped in or screwed in easily if there's a call for them. Internal dimming. In order to dim a light, you have to have the ability to vary the amount of power, the watts or amps of power that are going into the light. And there's a couple ways to do that. Leotech has internal to their fixture 3 different plugs. So you plug it into one of the 3 and it's going to run that light at 350 milliamps, 525 milliamps, or 750 milliamps. So you get 3 different outputs. Cree, Acuity, a couple of the others, Philips, they have an internal dimming switch that has 8 or 9 settings, and they dim it by 10% increments. So in that instance, you can go into the fixture and set the dimming switch to a dial setting of 5, and you're at 50% power. So what that allows you to do, I can show you the town of Canton, was I used one fixture for the entire town except a couple isolated areas. And then we adjusted the fixture in place to meet the requirement at that place, so that meant I only had to have 2 on the shelf. Made it real easy. What's important though is you've got to understand, if you're a National Grid service territory, the way they're going to bill you for your street light is they put them in 50 watt buckets. So if your LED street light falls anywhere from 0 to 50, they're going to bill it at 25 watts, regardless. So you order the 54 watt fixture from the factory set to 49 watts. It gets a 49 watt label or a 50 watt label. Now you're going to be billed at 25 watts, but you still have that 8 settings that you can adjust it, and you can play with it all day long. It won't affect your bill. These are things that you need to understand are capabilities that exist within the LED so that when you get ready to place your order, you come up with a design and then you pick a product that's going to meet your design and do it at the lowest possible cost. And that's part of the process that we help our communities through, is doing that. So the dimming also is done with a 0 to 10 volt dimming driver. Most manufacturers today, that's the only type driver they're putting in the lights anymore. They don't like producing 15 different brands of the same light. So they just say, you know what, we're going to give it the dimming driver, we're going to give it the ANCA 5-pin photocell receptacle, and that's it. That's how we're going to do it, in one flavor. So that photocell receptacle on the top, the old ANSI 1220 standard, had 3 pins. So you had a power in, you had the switch from the photocell to tell the light to go on or off, and then the power that would pass through to the other pin back to the street light to turn it on. The new ones come with either 5 or 7. They're on the outside, so there's 4 on the outside and the 3 in the center that are in a circle. The 2 of those, pins 4 and 5, are strictly for talking to the driver to dim the light. They won't do anything else. So you can't connect a motion sensor or a weather monitor or anything else to that light. You need all 7 pins if you want to be able to connect other devices to it and take advantage of that communication platform. And we'll talk about the controls in a minute. So what we're recommending, and we have also recommended to NYSERDA, is that communities should always specify the 7-pin, not the 5-pin, because that gives you the future proofing. And what's the difference in cost? It's about $3 to $5. So it's a nominal cost, but it certainly is going to save you a lot of headache later if you decide to go with controls at some point in the future. Well, how much you spend for an LED light? How much should you spend for an LED light? And I've seen wild prices, let me tell you. A Leotech, Acuity, Philips, Cree replacement for a 100-watt fixture should be around 38 watts, 40 watts, and it'll run you about $115 to $125. Anything more than that, you're being ripped off. Now, quantity does have an impact. So if you're a community only ordering 40 lights through your local distributor, I guarantee you're going to pay a lot more than that. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we're putting together these aggregations. And that's what we did in Rhode Island. We put together an aggregation of 27 communities, and we went out to bid for 38,000 streetlights. Some of those communities only have a few hundred lights, so, but they're getting the benefit of the fact that we had this aggregation. So that's why aggregating is important. Now here's one other thing. I guarantee you your towns will have a 400-watt high-pressure sodium light in it, because somebody felt it needed to be really bright there. That's like taking your car and parking it 10 feet from a wall and turning on your headlights and saying, oh gee, I'm making it better. That light is too close to the ground to do any good. Light dissipates at the square of the distance. So in order for you to justify a 400-watt light, you really need to have a light that's 50 to 65 feet in the air before it begins to be useful. Otherwise, you've just got a really nice bright spot right here and not much better out there. And the problem with that is it creates a lot of glare, and it actually affects your ability to see. You know what happens when you shine a flashlight in your eyes at night, you know? Well, you get the same effect if you over-illuminate. And so in every project I've done, even before LEDs became a fad, was I'd convert every 400 light in the town to 250 watts. And nobody ever noticed. So part of your design process is you say, forget the 400-watt light. Unless that sucker is 55 or 60 feet in the air, I'm going to treat it as if it's a 250 or less. And the other thing is keep in mind that the way the human eye adapts, if I keep shining a light in your eyes will not adapt to the darkness. So it's in fact better if the light is lower, especially if you're going to go from light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, to give your eye the opportunity to do a little more adaptation. Your eye's pretty amazing. So, all right, these are some recommended wattage replacements based on today's technology, which is around 100 lumens per watt. And it gives you a range. As part of the design process, if you think you're going to go to controls at some point in the future, you have to decide if you want a light that has both up and down side capability. So for example, you look here at the 50-watt high-pressure sodium, which is the most common light in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Maine. Here it's more like a 70 or a 100. It tends to be a little brighter in New York. But the replacement for a 50-watt is 20 to 28 watts. So what you would do is you'd select a 28-watt, but you'd actually operate it at 20 watts. That would give you 8 watts that you can increase it if there's an emergency with the control. And then, and also, the other advantage of that is when you operate these lights, if you have a 28 watt light and you operate it at 20 watts, you extend the life of that light because you're putting less stress on it. So you increase the life expectancy and decrease the failure rates, so it's good for maintenance.
George, I think one thing about this chart that was great when we got it together was we were able to share it with people who were getting information from like distributors, think about Kingston, that was too high, and so this is a common issue you confront, right?
Yes.
Utilities and distributors are pushing lights that are too bright.
Well, let's look at something. The utilities replaced 100 watt mercury vapor lamps with 70 watt high pressure sodium. A 100 watt mercury vapor lamp, when it's brand new, produces 4,000 lumens. A 70 watt HPS produces 6,300. So we already had this creep when the utility converted, because what were they trying to do? They're trying to preserve the fact that they want to sell watts. So they and then they're doing the same thing with LEDs. The number one complaint, if you do a search about LEDs, is glare and too bright. Look at the example of what happened in Brooklyn. Look what's happened out in California. Cities had to take down lights and replace them. I've done 200,000 of these conversions, and I can tell you that in any city or town, the number of complaints I've had, with one exception, Providence, you can count on the fingers of one hand. The problem with Providence was we put in a full-up control system, but because we were dependent on the DOE to get up a tower that had the gateway, we couldn't talk to the controls, and we put them in at the 28 watt level and wanted to operate them at the 20 watt level, so we were operating them all at 28 watts, and people said, "Whoa, what'd you do to us?" It's now, everything's under control, and we haven't had a single complaint. So you will find, if you'll go a little bit lower, not only are you going to save more money, but you're going to have a lot better public satisfaction with what you've done. And if you buy it with the internal capability to adjust it, if you do have complaints and you feel like it's justified and there's enough push, you have the ability to go out in the field and easily adjust it without having to change the fixture. So again, these are all things to think about in terms of design. Now the design lights, the NYSERDA has the program with the Clean Energies program, and you get grants by doing 4 of the major things, and so you can use that money for LED lights. They're actually thinking about a LED incentive just for doing the LED lights, where you'd get 16 cents or some value for every kilowatt saved. And they came to us and asked for our advice as to what they should include as part of the requirements for you to qualify for their grants. One of those is that the light should be listed under the Design Lights Consortium. So the DLC has said that LED lights have to meet certain minimum criteria to be qualified. Their power factor has to be better than 90%. Their harmonics have to be less than 20%. And they just recently, this past year, changed the the efficacy to at least 100 lumens per watt. That caused some top-notch fixtures to fall out of the picture. But the fact of the matter is, I have some fixtures that are at 156 lumens per watt. So they're trying to drive that market and get the most efficient lights out there. So we recommended that the lights should be on their list, the DLC list. We recommended a minimum of 55% savings. That's an easy one. The reason why we went to 55% is you may have some communities that actually want to add lights where they don't currently have them, or they may have some areas of the community that are underlit where they feel they need to increase the lighting. So we wanted to provide a little bit of comfort room for communities to be able to do that and still qualify for the grant monies. That was the logic that we had when we made those recommendations. Okay, controls. This is a tough one. Controls are expensive, about $100 to add a control to a streetlight. So you're almost doubling your costs. The labor costs remain the same. It's about $86 or so to install an LED light per fixture. So now we've gone from $120 to $220 to put in a system with controls, and then that depends on whether you have to buy the gateways, which are a single unit that that communicates with 15,000 of the lights or however many lights are out there, and then it's tied into the internet either through a cellular or hardwire connection, so that's how you get the information back from the streetlights, is through that AP or that gateway. Do you have to pay for that or not? And then there's also fees associated with the software and with the network maintenance. So those are all things you have to look at. But these manufacturers, these systems operate on 2.4 gigahertz, 5.8 gigahertz, they're in the 500 megahertz, they're in licensed FCC bands, they're in the 900 megahertz. You have GE, which is a completely proprietary system, and they're trying to build it into what they call the power door or the fixture. So, you know, you buy the GE system, you're locked into GE. You have a TALC consortium that's trying to build interoperability so that all of these systems, like your cell phones, a Sprint phone will talk to an AT&T phone, will talk to a Verizon phone. They're trying to get that sort of interoperability. It doesn't exist yet. So, and then everybody talks about the Internet of Things. Oh yeah, we're going to do all of these wonderful things. It doesn't exist yet, except in very limited areas. So the real question is, which horse is going to still be on the track at the end of the race? And which one do you pick? And how do you pick it? And then the other aspect of this is the problem, as I see it, is municipal finance. Savings this year, next year is cost avoidance, because whatever you save this year, that got absorbed in the next year's budget, and it's paying for the new police wages, or it's paying for some other program, and now we're all right back to where we were with another new budget we got to create, and all those savings are absorbed, and maybe all we did was keep the tax rate from going up as much as it might otherwise have gone up. That's all we've done. Controls will not save money to pay for themselves. At most, you're talking 22 to 27% savings, but you've already got 75% of the savings when you convert it to LEDs in the first place. So now you're talking about, take a 100-watt light that uses 550 kilowatts a year, you change that to a light that uses 160 kilowatts a year, and then you're going to get a 25% savings of that, so you're going to save 40 kilowatts a year times 20 cents per kilowatt. What do you got, $88? And this device costs $100, so how long, what's the return on your investment, plus maintenance for it? So there is no return on investment on controls. Why do you buy controls? You buy controls because of the future capability that you can use the control for. It's for that extra, the weather monitor, the traffic monitor, the camera capability, and all of those kinds of things. And because there's enough savings associated with converting to LEDs to cover the cost of this. If you decide to wait, the problem is you're going to have to go back to the taxpayers and ask for more money to pay for the control system. But the benefit of waiting is the controls are going to get less expensive, and maybe we'll figure out which horses are going to be left on the track at the end of the day. So this is a tough decision that you all have to make. I've installed 40,000 controls so far, and I'm wrestling with making these systems work, training the customers, and managing all of this, and it's, I will tell you, it's not easy. It's also another complex failure point for your streetlights. So this is something you need to have serious discussions internally as to whether controls make sense. Talked to some folks this morning where maybe what we want to do, and I'm doing this down in Rhode Island, we're putting controls just in an isolated particular area, which is going to be relatively small and fairly easy to manage, where there may be a real requirement for it. So in Charlestown, south of Route 6, they've got a lot of summer homes there, and we're going to use the control system because we're going to have, I can talk to a water meter with the same control, and I can also monitor a water sensor. So if somebody's got a water leak, and these are a lot of summer homes, we can offer a service to those folks where we'll monitor their home for them, and if there's a problem, we'll respond, and the town can make some extra money. So that's why we're doing it. In North Smithfield, they've got an industrial area, and they want to put this in the industrial area to help enhance the industrial area and make it more attractive for businesses. So these are the kinds of reasons you'll do it. but basically understand it's going to significantly increase the cost and complexity of your project and the future maintenance of your system. Think about it before you make that decision, and then think carefully about which system you choose. There are several companies out there that are in the water meter business. They've got millions of these things, like Silver Springs has 500,000 of these controls they sold to Florida Power and Light. They've got 21 million of these devices that are in electric meters. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. I'm not worried about Silver Spring Networks. Plus, there's 3 companies that take their communication board and install it in controls. So I got 3 companies out there I can compete against one another. And I'm working with one of those companies to get them to build me a hockey puck that goes between the control and the street light that gives me camera capability, cellular based, as well as it has a power port and a data port, so I can attach additional devices and readily take advantage of the network. But you know, it's not done yet. We're getting there, and we're pushing this. So
Our town operates an airport too. We have a lot of lights out there on the runways and taxiways. Is there will be lighting programs for them too, for airports and the beacons?
well, there are lights available. Yes, absolutely.
For airports, this was a
Yes.
question about municipal airports.
Yep.
Yeah.
The technology's there.
Now, we also have some other questions, George, that came in. You may not be the right person to ask on this, but the person remotely asked if the piggybacking law that you're referring to is GML 103. Do you know?
I don't know,
Okay,
but we looked
we'll
it
find
up, and
out.
it's actually listed. I think it's identified in our document.
Oh,
We
in the
referenced it.
RFP.
In the RFP, it's
Right,
referenced.
so shortly on our web.
Somehow I'm thinking it's 106.
Oh, yeah? Okay. On our website soon, we will have the RFP for community-managed LED projects, and it will be referenced there. This was earlier, someone asked, how do you define a small project? So I think before the break, we were saying about how NYPA defines a small project, which is 400 lights or less, and that's where that's not the market that they're in. And this question was kind of a.
Let me
Yeah.
go a step farther. I define a small project as one that falls under the dollar limits. So in Massachusetts, for example, I can do a project up to $10,000 as a DPW without having to go out to bid. That's a small project. That allows me simply to find a local contractor I like and trust, to purchase the materials and go do it. So knowing that your average install cost is going to be around $300 to $350, you can divide that into 10,000 and figure out how many lights you can do. There is also in Massachusetts a law that says up to $35,000 I can get 3 quotes, and it can be an email. It doesn't have to be a formal bid. As long as I get 3 quotes, I can then contract. And then lastly, there's an additional provision if you use an approved energy efficiency contractor that I can do up to $100,000 worth of work if it's energy efficiency work. So I would suggest that you need to look at the statutes. If you can get away with just, selecting and doing the stuff you want without having to go out to a formal bid, and I'm more than happy to kind of give you some guidance as to the process of how you select the things you want and with the design and all that sort of thing. That's the way I would go for these really small communities. Keep it simple.
Right.
Sub-zero temperatures with LEDs, any?
Oh, they love it.
They love it?
Oh, they love it.
Colder the better?
The colder the better. Now, another good light for your decorative lights, and Pat and I saw a very good example of this up in Lake Geneva. They use induction. The induction is a technology that's been around since the early 90s. It's a fluorescent. It's very soft in color. You can get a warm color temperature. Has a 100,000 hour life expectancy, proven. Only drawback to it is it gets colder and colder. Like fluorescence, it has a little more difficulty starting, and it doesn't produce as much light.
All right, so we are going to turn it over to your questions very shortly, but I just want to run through a couple of things that I think will cause some questions. So I talk to a lot of people. I'm kind of like the front of the train, and then as the questions get more and more technical, I pass them on to George. But a lot of people, municipal people, have said to me over the last 18 months, how do I get started? I'm with you, but it seems very complicated. Just explain to me how I get my toe in the water here. And the one thing we haven't really spoken about today is, but it's certainly covered in our written materials, is George talked about the field audit, and that is good, but it's somewhat involved. He talked about using ArcGIS software and that kind of thing, which we have a PowerPoint to teach you how to do. But the other thing that can really get you going in an interesting way and foster discussion in your community is to begin by getting a billing audit. So there's only a couple providers that we have found in New York State that do this, but they're in hot competition with each other. And I'm going to show you their names in a moment. Normally we like to, give you 20 names, but we don't know 20 providers of this. So a billing audit by a third party confirms the utility inventory. So the third question I received through email from someone in our audience was, I have the inventory, but now what do I do? Well, you have the utility inventory, and it is not unkind, it's just reality to say that these inventories are often found to be full of errors. And so there's a long industry in New York State, 30 years or more, of third parties that conduct audits of utility companies and telecommunication companies. And they do it for no upfront fee. They take a contingency fee at the end. So that's a great way to get started, because if you're contemplating buying this major asset, you need to know what the asset is, right? And this is your opportunity to sort out, okay, well, actually that's on the school's property and we shouldn't be charged for it. Or I think, George, you mentioned earlier, sometimes you might find you're being undercharged, but you still need to know what it is you're purchasing. So that's a great first step to get the conversation started. And then typically people would follow that and confirm that with the field audit, where they might even, you heard from Jen Metzger in Rosendale, when they did their field audit, and town of Marbletown too, that helped us with this how-to PowerPoint on our website, they actually decided to decommission some lights. So that made a difference to do that up front, so that when you go to buy something, when you buy the replacement stuff, you don't need those 20 lights. She said that they decommissioned 20 lights. So those are all beginning things to do. The other thing that, if it's not on our website now, it will be very shortly, is we have a model, and I think Amanda in Syracuse does too. We have a model letter that you can send to the utility to kick it off, to actually ask them, we are contemplating buying our street lights, please provide the information and the estimated purchase price. And we've got some very nice template language for you so that you get all the right information. The joint procurement activities, as we said, that's going to roll out over time, and Jamie and the other coordinators will keep you apprised of our activities, and there is always that opportunity, a year afterwards, up to a year afterwards, to piggyback on what we're doing. So those are all, I can understand after sitting through this for a couple hours, it may seem pretty daunting. But there's some really straightforward things you can do now, that shouldn't be daunting, that can help you get started. So here are those resources, and of course we're going to email this to you. Our website where we post all our documents, the two competing billing audit companies, Computel and Troy Banks. One is in Buffalo, the other one's in Syracuse, or outside of Syracuse. And then, of course, NYPA is very involved, and they'd be happy to talk to you. Other resources, again, I sound like a broken record, but posted on our website. These are the two documents that George referenced. They are brand new documents from the Department of Energy about blue light and response to the American Medical Association. How many people have gotten that kind of question from the public about, do you know about blue lights? If you're thinking of going to LEDs, you have to talk to us, that kind of thing. Not yet. You'll hear from people, because we certainly are. And I think particularly in our area where communities are seeing conversions take place already, and then they saw the American Medical Association article, they became very concerned and wanted to ask us about it. So those are posted, and then Jen Metzger's document, which is lengthy, will be available pretty shortly, but the last and final chapter is just a how-to. Here's the 6 steps, or the whatever steps it is, that you could follow as kind of a blueprint. Now, this last slide that we have for you, and then we can chat. I think George and Jen and Nina have wisely tried to stay away from, here's the specifics. One of the first questions that came in today was, just tell me what the payback period is, right? I just need to know for my people. And it's tough because, as you've seen, there's a lot of variables to this thing. But I managed to interview George about some recent, communities he had helped, and put together some numbers. And then Jen Metzger crunched some numbers about a recent couple of transactions by Orange and Rockland. Now, what's interesting, I'm going to move this here so you can see it. What's interesting about these numbers is they look kind of quaint based on what we've heard more recently about the per light charges that perhaps NGrid is contemplating. But this is just an example. So 2 communities are on record, these are public documents, having paid approximately $165 per existing street light for their buyout. And then with George's numbers here, the all-in cost for a new LED fixture, including labor, right? You talked about significantly lower numbers, George, before labor. But in a turnkey project with something like $350, $360, and then you'd pay 25 or 30% less if you did it community managed, right? So that brought the per light cost down to about $250. We talked today about pole rental fees. I think you even said, why don't we just buy the pole? But O&R doesn't charge any fee, so that that didn't have to go into the calculation. And so we got down to brass tacks and came up with this number. 1,000 light conversion would cost approximately $500,000, bottom line. Now, it could differ, in your region because of higher prices per unit, but that is what is out there right now that a couple communities have managed to complete transactions. The payback period varies, but according to our research, it's about up to 3 years. That's a very fast payback period. Yeah. And then that's all leading up to the purchase and the install and all that, but the additional savings that roll out over the years is the lack of maintenance that you'll be doing because, again, I got this from George, you could expect to pay perhaps 50 cents per month per light as opposed to $4 per month per light average. How am I doing, George?
Good.
Get this right? So, your savings compound and continue over time.
Now, that 50 cents doesn't apply if you got a control system.
Okay, yeah, yep. All right, so then I'm just gonna show,
In fact, those prices are without a control system.
yeah. All right, so this is our little website. There's a place where you can jump on, you push the municipalities button to get on our mailing list, so you'll continue to get educational materials from us, newsletters and the RFPs and that kind of thing. I'm just gonna see if we had any more questions come in. Not yet, it looks like. So Jamie, what would you like to do now in terms of, we had wanted to have more of a group discussion. Do you want to tee up some of the questions that you've had and that are reflected in what people have said to you, municipal leaders have said to you about their concerns?
Well, I'm kind of new to it too.
Yeah.
So maybe that's essentially why we did this today too. But basically how you get started, and I've seen a couple communities that I've worked in. that just started switching out bulbs, they already own them, and I can't stress enough, and I've been learning from George today as well. If you make a mistake, you're living with it for a long time. So planning is critical, and there's no reason why you can't start that today. There's no reason why you can't find out what the buyout of your asset is, or the utilities asset is right now. Start that ball rolling, and then as National Grid and NYSERDA start making this available, you'll be in a position to start to move.
Could we see a show of hands? How many NYSEG communities do we have? Okay. And then N-Grid.
You're multiple.
Yeah.
There's a couple like you.
Yeah. So it's a good mix.
But I only have national, or University of Gas only have 21 versus 332 in the other.
Yes.
I had a question
Rarely.
about but you were talking about something where you have to complete 4 out of 10, what was that?
Oh,
So that's the Clean Energies Community, and I think Jen spoke about it, right?
Yeah,
Earlier. So the Clean Energy Community is a
Amanda.
I get all the names all messed up. The Clean Energy Communities program is a NYSERDA program. They've identified 10 action items, and I have the guidance document. If you don't have it, you can take it with you. If you can complete 4 of those 10 action items, you get designated a Clean Energy Community. And you're probably familiar with the Regional Economic Development Councils. So we're in the North Country region. So out of the 7 counties, 18 awards will be awarded to the first 18 clean energy communities. With that said, 4 of them are populations over 40,000. So that's Jefferson, St. Lawrence, Franklin, and Clinton County. So basically, there's 14 awards for all the remaining municipalities. And at this point, the town of Plattsburgh just became the last. There were 4 $100,000 winners. The remainder will be $50,000 awards. And I try to stress to communities too, don't do it just for the money. Do it so you can understand your assets and you start to learn how your community functions, and you can start to save money just on energy efficiency. One of the biggest savings is LED streetlights.
I'd like to hear conversation among our supervisors and municipal leaders in terms of if they went this route or the municipal-owned route, how would they deal with maintenance? What thoughts they would have on how they would deal with that?
the question was how are municipal leaders feeling about maintaining their streetlights? Opening it up for discussion. And George is coming back.
You know how I would do it? I would present a shared service between the smaller communities so that we use the same contractors, or we train an internal staff person of our DPWs or our highway departments to maintain the street lighting, and then we would utilize them throughout all of our communities.
So
that we weren't-
let me give you several examples, because you just hit on one. In Massachusetts, the town of Amherst, who I can look up how many lights they had, but they had a fairly decent sum of lights, several, 1,500 or 2,000. They used their savings to hire a full-time electrician on staff and to buy a bucket truck. Because they looked at how much money they were spending on electricians coming in, fixing things in the schools and the municipal buildings and that sort of thing. And they said, if we own the electrician, we don't have to pay that out anymore. And we've got this pot of money, we can do this. They then took on responsibility for doing the lights in neighboring communities. So those communities then would pay them for that service, and that also helped offset the cost of that electrician. So that goes right to the heart of what you just said. And it's beautiful, because now you have not just a guy to repair the lights, but you also have a licensed master electrician who can go around and help all the schools or do other work beyond just the streetlights. So that's one approach. In Rhode Island, what we did was we formed a collaborative. It's called PRISM. And in PRISM, what we did was we actually hired staff, set up a call center. We went out and contracted with a contractor to do the maintenance work, and everything flows through PRISM. And PRISM attaches a 10% charge. So we, if we buy a LED streetlight for a community for $120, we sell it to the community for $130. And then if the contractor goes out and does an $80 service charge, we bill the town $88. Now what we've done is we've told the town, that we think your costs are going to be X dollars per light per month. So we want you to pay us every month that amount of money, but we're going to put that into an escrow account, and that escrow account belongs to you. And so we will spend out of that escrow account, and at the end of the year, if we didn't spend it all, we're going to come back to you and say, here's how we did. What do you want to do with the money that's left over? And our costs to run the office, the call center, to have the staff in there to answer and to manage everything, to handle, all the billing is handled through PRISM, so it makes it real easy for the communities because they formed this collaborative, and then they through the collaborative and through what they pay for the cost of the service. And it's been in place now for almost 3 years, and it's going really well. So we're managing about 70,000 streetlights right now. And the other thing that I really like about the way that it's structured is when the city of Providence was going to have this festival, and they said, geez, we'd really like to do this on Washington Street. This was at a meeting on Tuesday morning. By Thursday, I had it done because I could control all of that for them. So that's another approach. The only other way you can do it is go out regionally. But once you go to LEDs, you're going to have two different types of work. You're going to have the LED that fails prematurely or the photocell that fails prematurely. There's always going to be a percentage of those, about 1%. So if you have 100 lights, you're going to have a call out maybe 1 or twice a year. Then you're going to have, every time the utility is going to put in a new pole to replace an old worn out pole, or somebody plows into a pole, you're going to have that kind of a response that needs to take place. So you do that on a time and materials basis, and you can engage the services of a contractor who's qualified, and you just give them a call when you have a need for those services, and they'll come out and take care of it. Obviously, that's not going to feed their children, so they have to continue to do other work. And if you want them to respond within a limited period of time, then you need to offer them a retainer of some sort that says, if I call you, I want you to haul right away. And we're going to pay you a small fee every month. So you build that into your costs. The other way to do it would be for a large company, and this is what RealTerm, for example, does. You establish a relationship with IBEW, and they go to the local union hall. So whatever your local union hall is, they're going to go to them to get the people they need to do the work, and they're going to contract through the union hall. It is tough, though, when you've got communities that are scattered over wide distances. The beauty of Rhode Island is it's so darn small that you can get from one end of it to the other in an hour, hour and a half. Not true in New York. Takes me that long to get to St. Albans, so. And it's only 4.6 miles from here. I need a helicopter. But, you know, the beauty of LED technology, though, is that the maintenance costs drop so much. Now, the other opportunity you might have, and this is what we've done in Maine, is we've actually negotiated with the local utility to do the work. We negotiated fixed prices for each of the different types of things, and then we just had the local utility do it. In this case, it would be NYSERDA, and you would pay them. Or we have, in Massachusetts, I've got Braintree Electric, which is a small muni, and they're doing the work for a neighboring community. I've got Paxton Municipal Light Department is doing work for a neighboring community, and I've got Westerly doing work for neighboring communities. So local municipal power companies, you could contract with them to do the service work too. Those are the approaches, and you just have to look at your, you know, who's the mix and how far apart are they to come up with a solution. And again, I'm more than happy to try to help you with that. But Amherst found a way to save money on their electrician costs, actually make a little money, and solve other problems. Town of Maynard did the same thing. Maynard was funny. They used to service their traffic signals with a ladder truck. So their electrician would get on the end of the ladder truck, they'd swing it out over the intersection, lift him up so he could change the bulbs in the you've got to be kidding me. You should have seen him doing Christmas decorations. And that was interesting because I remember one of and they have a board of selectmen, they don't have a council, and one of the selectmen was absolutely convinced we wanted one of these tow-behind scissor type lifts, and I said, you gotta be kidding me. Think about that. I got a tow-behind scissor lift, I have to position it, I gotta put out cones, I gotta have, police details and all that sort of thing, and how much time is it gonna involve versus a guy in a bucket truck. So I finally convinced him to buy a bucket truck, and I helped him buy the bucket truck through the state bid. Anyway, there's a way to do this. In Lexington, Mass, the tree department does the streetlight maintenance because they have the buckets, and we gave them specialized training, and we got them the certifications that they needed. Now there's certain things they're not allowed to do, so we call in an outside contractor for that type of work. So you could have someone that has the skill set to do some very basic things, but if it's beyond that, then you'll have to call in somebody else to do it.
Robin, you got anything you wanted to add for, by the way, Robin works in the Capital District region, we actually work for her. Do you have any other things that, you've run into that we've missed or questions that you've been asked?
I think the main hurdle that we're facing with the communities that we serve, because most of them are in the National Grid territory, a couple have some NYSEG National Grid territory overlap, but it's just a pricing issue in terms of the fact that, as was covered in today's presentation, when you request a price from National Grid, which you can only do once in a year, so that's the one thing to kind of know and understand is if you do request that price, you need to be ready to act on it, or else you're going to have to wait another year. Without that price, it is very hard to plan for that project. So, if you don't know what it's going to cost to buy out those fixtures, then how are you supposed to plan for that capital improvement? So, something that we're really trying to work with others on is, as much as possible, trying to understand the process and trying to try and estimate to the best of our knowledge what we can estimate those prices to be. So, we're trying to work with folks on understanding again that process and then trying to mitigate that uncertainty of pricing. So that's the one kind of main hurdle that we're facing. But then also what we just talked about in maintenance costs. So what is it going to look like on the other side if you do own those streetlights, and how do you train staff or come up with shared service agreements or look at companies that might be able to provide the service for you. So those are some of the main things that we're looking at. And then of course the design features that George has talked about. So do you want dimming, or how do you design your lighting better for your community in terms of residential districts or commercial districts? So we are kind of looking at some of the same and similar issues that we see here in the North Country, because we do serve large urban areas, small rural communities. It's a real mix. So that's mainly what we're looking at. But with some of the work that Amanda Bizzoni has completed, and others across the state, we're kind of building our repertoire of what we know and what we can share with our folks on the ground. So that's why it's great working with Jamie and working with the folks at ANCA and Climate Action Associates and Dan Sullivan in the Mohawk Valley, because we're just continuing to build on what we can draw from different municipalities across the state. So that's my 8 cents, if you will.
Do you want to recap that for our audience? So it was Ingrid, I'll do it. That's all right. Yeah. So the question from Robin, or the comment from Robin, was just price uncertainty with National Grid, design questions and maintenance questions continue to be the primary topics that people are concerned with. Yeah. Okay.
That's kind of what the Comptroller General said back in 2008 when he wrote that report in January.
Well, just an observation there. Yeah, back in that time frame, the Comptroller of the state of New York, this was before LEDs were on the radar screen at all, suggested to all of you that you just go ahead and buy your streetlights, not put in new technology, just buy them, and because you'd be losing the rental. Right, you'd be losing the rental, trading over to ownership, And my office is next door to Kingston City Hall, and I cannot tell you how much they're enjoying their new electric bill. It's down $30,000 since they took over their streetlights, and they're just, you know, they're waiting to work with our RFP, so they're just, you know, in a holding pattern. So they've got the old lights, and they're paying $30,000 less a month. It's compelling.
When we started this in Massachusetts, I wrote the legislation there in 1996, and it became a matter of law in 1998 because they forced it to go to the voters for approval. We started out, nobody knew any. It was the same as where New York is right now. Nobody, you know, and now it's a robust business. So one of the things that I also recommend is before you go out with an RFP that you have a mandatory pre-bid conference. And I would suggest that you need, and the purpose of that is to help educate the contractors as to kind of what the work consists of, what's expected, so they can build their costs. When we did this the first time in Rhode Island, the costs we got back were a little bit high. So we said, okay, let's do this again. So we threw out the initial bids, and then we had a mandatory pre-bid conference, and we sat them down and talked to them about the expectations and what had been going on for years just north of them. The next round of bids we got back were substantially better. So again, I can help you with this. If you want to invite me to attend your pre-bid conference, you know, and you'll cover my expense to get there, I'm happy to do that.
Which country are you going to be coming from?
Well, let's see. Next week I'm in Omaha. The week after that I'm in Costa Rica.
So send them a bus ticket. Take the bus from Omaha.
You know, Jamaica and Costa Rica, in both instances, I'm actually working for the utility. And the beauty of that is to show them how LED streetlights can open up an entirely new door of opportunity for them, both to benefit their customer and to benefit the municipalities by offering ancillary services. But it has to be tied to much lower costs for the streetlights, not like NGrid is doing with 10 or 15% reduction in costs, when in fact their cost reductions are substantially higher than that. If you look at Rockland service territory, and I have it right here on my computer, they compare their revenue for each class of customer, and the customer on street, the average rate of return was $190 per megawatt hour sold, except for customer on streetlights. It was $2,800 per megawatt hour sold. Says something. This is fun stuff, guys. It's not that hard. It seems like it, but it's not that hard. Once you get into it, you'll find out it's actually pretty cool.
Any other questions or comments from anybody? Do you do any solar lights?
I'm a licensed energy broker.
Repeat the question.
Oh, do I do any solar? Well, I own a 12 kW solar system at my house, so I had no bill up until June. And I have helped communities write power purchase agreements to ensure that they get a assured benefit over time. But I don't actually manage solar projects. I just provide
I think he meant solar streetlights.
solar streetlights.
Yeah, I've actually gotten asked that before.
Yeah.
Well, first, the good news is the price of a solar streetlight has come down. I found a company at Light Fair this past year that does a solar streetlight for around $1,400. And the life expectancy on the battery is about 8 years. And so we have a senior center that's in Charlestown where we'd have to run power out to the parking lot in order to get and we'd have to trench underneath the asphalt and repair the asphalt and all of that, and all we need is 5 lights. And these things are direct buried, but they've got an anchorage, so there's no foundation or anything. It's real quick and easy. I've installed solar street lighting at Camp Lejeune out on the tank ranges because we had problems with tanks running over cars. So we actually have a traffic signal system out there with lights that is all solar powered. because it was going to cost a ton of money to get power out there. It generally, though, doesn't make sense cost-wise as compared to simply buying the electricity from the utility if the power is available.
What about if you just go dark? Put you out of business.
There's nothing wrong with that. You know, when were the first street lights installed? Back in 1860, 1850? And they were carbide and then gas. But we were driving horses and buggies, so we needed them in order for the horses to see and people to travel at night. And so it was done in order to attract business into town and to make it more attractive for people to come into town. We now have cars that have headlights that produce 1 million candle power. I don't need a streetlight for cars. I need streetlights for pedestrians. And if you think about doing a streetlight design, ask yourself this: if I had no streetlights in town at all, where would I put the first one? Where would I put the second one? And if you think of it in that way, you can begin to say, you know, I want to protect my children, particularly when they walk to school. So I'm going to put my streetlights to protect my children. And so, you know, and then I've got this place in the roadway where people seem to just want to keep going straight when it goes right. So I want to make sure they can see that. So, and those are the kinds of thought processes you go through. And then you get into the neighborhoods. The first street light I want is where the intersection is, because it helps you see the street sign. Because when you're looking for an address, you don't want to be out there with a flashlight trying to read the street sign. So, you know, as a DPW, I made sure all of my letters were the big ones, so it's easier to read. Robin?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, along that same vein, we have had a couple of communities that have shown interest in converting auto scale lighting to pedestrian scale lighting, or more historic lighting, and I was just wondering how many projects you might have worked on that have had that kind of similar vein of taking away the roadway fixtures and converting them to something more pedestrian scale.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, the question is about changing lights to something that's more historical, I guess,
And pedestrian, yeah.
and pedestrian. The town of Lexington, where I was the DPW director, we had 3,343 streetlights. We turned off 1,394 of them to save money, and then the Board of Selectmen discovered how many people they had that were upset in the town, and they had to turn them all back on. 1,691 of the lights were mercury vapors. 1,291 were incandescent, and they were either in a radial or a Admiral's hat fixture, and they desperately wanted to keep those. So we found a solution using induction lighting to keep the antique style. And induction lighting has a 100,000-hour life expectancy, so it was a good solution. Certainly not as energy efficient as LEDs are today, but back then, more efficient than LEDs. Yeah, I mean, this happens. In Newton, we had gas lights, and what we did was we came up with an LED light that looked just like a mantle that was glowing, that was, you know, and we actually pulled the wiring for it through the old gas lines. But that's not cheap.
Yeah.
I've got the same problem right now in Newburyport. That's going to be an interesting project because they have so many decorative lights and they're so fixated on, they have a lot of gas lights still in service. So we've got to come up with a solution, and they're acquiring their asset, and we're going to do the LED conversion. And I'm now getting involved in doing some illumination projects for buildings and bridges, and I want to do them with lights that have color change capability, so I can make the bridge green or red or blue, or, you know.
Yes, yeah, I know of some communities under downtown revitalization who very much are interested in the ornamentals, you know, the acorn type, and those you can only do if you buy them. In other words, you can't do a utility-owned option there, it's not an option. So that is their only option. And just for Jamie, that will satisfy clean energy community. You know, a community can put in ornamental ornamentals along a bridge or whatever, as long as they are a street light, it would qualify under clean energy
I
community.
don't think an ornamental is gonna fall under.
They can't do it.
I'm sorry, it's gotta be a cobra head, I believe.
Most of your ornamentals are typically metered. And so anything you do to them are going to be seen immediately across the meter. The second thing I will tell you, I'm willing to bet money every time that that ornamental is going to have a 150 or a 175 watt, either high pressure sodium or metal halide fixture in it. And they're way overlit. I talk about what I refer to as the Kincaid effect. Does everybody know who Thomas Kincaid is? Who does the artistry with the evening setting and you see the light coming from within, you know, the windows glowing and the smoke coming out of the chimney, and that's what he emphasizes. And the attraction of his paintings are the light that's coming from within the building. It makes you curious as to what's happening inside the building. When you put a street light up on a commercial street that lights up the facade of the building and emphasizes the facade of the building, you lose the Kincaid effect. And what you really want to do in a downtown area is have adequate lighting so people feel safe and comfortable and can see, but you also want to balance it against what's coming from within the buildings and the businesses, because you want people to be drawn to those businesses. And most often, these acorn-style lamps, for example, are too bright. The ones right over here in St. James, they're too bright. They could get by with something that's at least 50% less, and you wouldn't really notice the difference. Again, I think I said this, the human eye doesn't detect a 30% deviation. I could turn these lights down gradually while we're in here talking by 30%. You would never notice it. So you have a lot of flexibility in that regards to balance the lighting with what you're trying to accomplish. So in the town of Westwood, they had 68 of these acorn fixtures in their downtown district. And I replaced the 150 watt metal halides they had in there with a 34 watt LED. I went from 16,000 foot candles to about 3,000 foot candles, and you know what? Nobody noticed. They liked it.
I appreciate all that. What I was asking was a little bit different, and so I don't leave a misconception here. I was talking about communities that have existing COBRA on streets. Typically, it's been like bridges and places, and some I think are looking at downtown streets, and they want to get back to a historic look. And so it would be a COBRA going to an ornamental, probably trying to get that very look you were just talking about, that Kincaid effect. And so this is news to me. So Jamie, you're saying that that would not qualify in that?
That works.
So COBRA to,
Cobra,
Yes,
a
okay.
Cobra Q conversion works, it's just not.
You just can't take a standard ornamental light and switch it to an LED ornamental light and that count it as an action.
right.
I'm not sure how you do that unless you got a gooseneck mast arm or something like that and put a teardrop style fixture on it. I'm not sure how you would.
This would probably be the town having their own poles as well.
Yeah.
But getting back to what we're dealing with, numbers of lights. Do you have any other questions we have before we part? You have my business card, you'll have Pat's information, we'll make a tape available for you on this, and we're ready to start working with you in your process of moving forward. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do have one question, and that is getting community buy-in. And particularly in my community, it's basically a rural community, and we have 4 different lighting districts that are quite small. And in those lighting districts, you know, the people in those districts are taxed for the streetlights, and other people in the town are not taxed for them. So how do you convince the rest of the people to set out a project that they may not see as lowering their tax rates or saving or being beneficial to them? So
let me ask you one question quick. Are you trying to remove the districts, or you want to stay with the districts?
I honestly have not gotten that far, and I mean, I'm wondering how we might structure things, I don't know. I mean, removing the districts, I imagine, would be a fairly major proposition, so I really don't know.
Because the town of Schuyler Falls is,
We're going.
they're in the same issue.
Uh-huh.
But regardless, I mean, you can do your cost analysis, what the district's gonna have to pay, or you can try to remove your districts through the proper channel and then set it up so all pay. You could put a gate up, people outside the district can't come in at night.
This is a
Somebody's
question
paying
about
for
how to
those
get
streetlights,
community
and
buy-in.
And they're getting the money to pay for those streetlights from something.
Yeah, but no, the point is that the people, I guess, for instance, if we're doing a project, a town project, but basically, a lot of people will see it as only benefiting part of the town. Personally, I like the idea of seeing it as benefiting everybody, but it's also something that I can see in possibly a politically charged situation coming to the forefront, and I was just wondering, if anybody had any thoughts.
Well, my recommendation to start with, if you want to focus on the districts, is I would go over to the associations of towns, and find out how to do that properly.
My argument was based on the fact that our districts, well, 2 districts have 3 lights in them, and by consolidating all the districts, going with a townwide district, doing the conversion to LED, the actual cost per resident,
Right.
actually, the ones that are in districts go down, and the ones that aren't in districts stay the same. So there was really no.
The discussion
no negative effect.
is about consolidating light districts and then going to LED conversion to save money.
So the argument was, it's a good argument.
Yeah, it
to
is,
make, and
yeah.
The best argument I would always make when I wanted to consolidate a lighting district is you don't take your highway, your roads that you use, that everybody utilizes. Just the people that are living in those neighborhoods are not the only ones utilizing those streetlights. It's a safety, public safety issue. So I would say consolidate all your districts into one and make it the same as
Can
your
you
highway.
do that? The thing is, we have 2 different utility companies, so I don't know if we can do that.
You can, because we do it.
Okay.
We have 2 different ones as well. We budget it as one line item, as for street lighting. It's a townwide, it's a general fund, townwide expense.
Schuyler Falls, is that where you're from?
Black Rock.
Blackbrook.
What we did in Rhode Island, we have fire districts that have lights and pay the light bills. And we have other entities that are similar. They're currently paying $166 a year for that light, for the fixture charges and all that. We bought the lights, we convert them to LEDs, we now issue that fire district a bill, which is substantially less than what they were charged before. But the way the bill is structured, that the town is actually making a little bit of profit on it. So the town's making a little money to cover their maintenance and the capital investment they made. Fire district's saving money. Everybody wins.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all for coming.
Oh, what a great group. Yeah, give yourselves a hand.
Good afternoon.
And thank you to our online audience. You've been very patient with our coffee breaks and 7th inning stretches and questions that you couldn't quite.